As of recording this video, it was just over 25 hours ago that I was able to launch Gotham Knights for the first time on my PlayStation 5 and play it in its full 30 frame per second glory. Now, I know that many people are upset that the game does not run in 60 frames per second, but as someone who is very used to 30 frames per second games, it has not bothered me in the slightest. But outside of an 8-hour-long nap that many people might call a night of sleep, I have been playing Gotham Knights pretty much nonstop. I put somewhere between 12 to 16 hours into this game, and I wanted to give my thoughts and answer some of your burning questions, such as, how does Gotham Knights compare to Arkham? How are the side missions? How are the RPG mechanics? How is the combat? I'm going to get to all of it. I'm going to get to how I feel about all of it. I want to say this is not a spoiler review. This is just a guy who's maybe a third to a half of the way through the game and my reaction and thoughts to it so far. First of all, let's get into the big one. Is it as good as Arkham? No, it's not. But once you stop trying to play it like an Arkham game, you're going to have a lot more fun. The combat here does stand well on its own. It's not as refined as Arkham, nor is it as refined as Spider-Man's combat in the Insomniac games. It feels like a bit of a mix between the two. It feels timed out more like Spider-Man's combat, but still grounded like Batman's combat, where you're not going to flip dudes into the air and start kicking them without gravity affecting you. You are on the ground, but you are dodging instead of parrying. It is fun in its own right, but you have to stop trying to play it like a Batman Arkham game. In terms of the RPG mechanics and the overall feel of the game, there is stealth, but the game is much more loose with how you can handle situations. If you want a more stealthy approach, that is up to you. The game does not hand you Predator rooms, which for some they might enjoy. For me, it's kind of frustrating. I appreciated having some of those more challenging encounters in the Batman Arkham games that simply aren't present here. If you want to jump in fists or guns blazing in Gotham Knights, you can absolutely do that in pretty much any encounter without getting shot down like you would in the Arkham games if you tried the same thing. If you do want to use stealth, the stealth mechanics here are pretty well designed as well. They're not quite as refined as the Arkham series, and the consequence for getting caught isn't death, but it's just getting caught, and then your stealth is ruined, and you either have to get back into stealth by hiding, or you need to just start punching. But overall, everything works pretty well. The gameplay works pretty well here, but nothing is quite as refined as Arkham or Spider-Man. The traversal works well enough. It is not dependent on gliding like the Arkham games was. In fact, in order to access gliding, you have to do a pretty monotonous side mission, or if you want to access the Red Hood soul jump or the Robin teleportation, there is a pretty monotonous side mission that you have to do for each of the characters that you want to apply their knighthood traversal mechanic to, and that is irritating. It's monotonous, and I know that there are a lot of people who are really frustrated with that. There's people who have been really frustrated with the fact that you have to do a side mission in order to unlock fast travel points, but I want to first point out a pretty big double standard that I'm seeing here. Yes, there are grindy elements of Gotham Knights, but there were very grindy elements of Arkham Knight and Spider-Man PS4 that people seem to have completely forgotten. Yes, you have to complete a side mission to unlock fast travel locations, but do I have to remind you how many radio towers I had to take offline in Spider-Man PS4 before I could even see the map, much less fast travel? Do I have to remind you how far into the campaign of Arkham Knight you had to get before you could lower the bridges to 2/3 of the map? You were stuck on one island in Arkham Knight in the Batmobile before you could finally start driving in the other areas as well. There are level gating mechanics that have been in so many superhero games that aren't Gotham Knights. I think it's just more apparent in Gotham Knights because it takes an RPG approach. Now, this RPG approach has some benefits to it, and I am someone who has always said I actually like a lot of RPG ideas. It's the execution that I just don't feel like game developers have gotten right quite yet. I do feel that the one game that got it perfect was Red Dead Redemption 2. If you think about it, that game pretty much has every RPG mechanic in the book, from customization to looting to all of it, but they just blend it so well into gameplay and the narrative of the roleplay that it doesn't turn into damage numbers or random weird customization menus. In that game, if you want to go change your outfit, you go to your camp, you go to your wardrobe, and then they pop open a menu that has all of the items that you've bought or stolen from people that you can use to deck out your character. In Gotham Knights, it's more like Avengers. You go to a main menu with about 60 tabs with resources that you have no idea what they are, trying to craft things that you don't quite know what they mean, with damage numbers and defense numbers that you don't really understand how they impact your character level or the story, but you're trying to keep your character strong as the levels are rising with the enemies, as your character level rises. You're trying to navigate around ability points, and overall, it's just really not a fun experience. It's really frustrating. I love the idea of customization. I love the idea of going back to the Belfry after you've interrogated enemies, learning about a supervillain that you're going to have to go fight, and then decking out your suit with strengths against that enemy. So for example, it would be really cool if you got to go learn about Mr. Freeze and then customize a suit that was resistant to his cryogenic freeze gun. Unfortunately, it's not really that well thought out. It's just based on the very generic RPG numbers and level gating and grinding, and I just don't see why these elements are added to games without purpose. I wish that more games did it like Red Dead Redemption 2, where they found narrative and character-driven reasons for the customization to exist in the game, and found ways to help you get lost in the world as you applied the changes that you wanted. Now, in terms of the story, I think this is a big one. I have enjoyed it to a large degree. I think it's compelling. I like what they're doing with the Court of Owls. It is short on villains, which has been unfortunate because this is the biggest Gotham City in a video game that we've seen thus far, at least to my knowledge, and I wish that there were more villains around. There's really only the 3 side villains that we were shown in the trailer, and in the main campaign we have the Court of Owls. There's another faction that I don't want to spoil in case you don't know what it is. There's a hidden villain that shows up somewhere, so there's like 3 or 4 in the main story as well, but outside of that, there's not only not other villains, there's also not references to them. There's not really many Easter eggs. I found a few, but this game is not packed with Easter eggs, it's not packed with references, no one really mentions characters like Joker, and it's just weird. It doesn't really make the city feel lived in. In terms of the narrative itself, it's interesting, but not particularly well paced. It feels really slow, and with all the open world grinding that you have to do between story missions, it slows it down even further. On top of that, the story feels like it is very much tailored to fit any of the 4 characters that you are playing as, which is unfortunate, because then as I've played through the entire campaign as Batgirl, it doesn't feel like it's progressing her character. When you compare this to something like Spider-Man PS4, you see all the character development that went into Peter Parker. You can't really apply that to Barbara Gordon because it's a story that also needs to be able to fit Jason Todd or Dick Grayson or Tim Drake, who all have very different personalities. There are a few personal cutscenes for each character hidden around the city that develop their character, and they are touching. They're just few and far between and feel a little out of place since they don't really connect with the overall campaign. So overall, with Gotham Knights, I do feel that it's an interesting story. It just isn't able to be tailored to any character in particular. Now, in terms of the chemistry between the characters, this is something that was allegedly really strong from some of the reviews. It is. When you go to the Belfry and you're talking to the gang, it's cool, it's fun, but the game itself doesn't translate that into gameplay. When you're out in the city, you are very much a solo act the same way that you were when you were Batman. That's fun for gameplay. I've had a lot of fun playing as Batgirl, but then when I go back to the Belfry and they're acting like all of the other characters who have essentially been glorified cameos over my comms are as essential to the story as Batgirl, it feels clunky and it just doesn't feel natural. Even when you're out in the city, it doesn't feel like the other characters are out, even though that's the intention. Everyone's supposed to be out every night. And then during the day, you meet back at the Belfry, but overall, it kind of just feels like I'm the only one out in Gotham. It would do wonders for the feel and the vibe of the team dynamic if when I was out as Batgirl, if I happened to cross Nightwing on a rooftop and he wanted to talk for a second, and he wouldn't have to help me in combat or anything, but just to get that little nod that, oh, the other characters are out here doing things. Or if I showed up at a crime scene, or a premeditated crime even, and had Nightwing standing there helping a victim being like, don't worry, Babs already got it covered. That would be a really cool mechanic and a narrative trick to help you really feel like the other knights are out helping you. But it just doesn't give off that impression. Yes, the chemistry is good, but again, the story isn't built around any one of them, and so it just feels unfocused. And overall, I feel like the whole game is a bit unfocused. I don't know which audience it's trying to appeal to. I don't know if it's trying to appeal to huge fans of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, or the fans of the Arkham series, or the fans of Avengers. It just doesn't feel focused. So while yes, I am having fun with the game, and yes, there is more customization, and yes, there are things that it does better than Arkham, I can't really say that there's anything in this game that is as refined as Arkham. It's not an Avengers level disaster, but it isn't a superhero masterpiece. It isn't one that I think will be remembered like the Arkham series was. With that being said, I have to give major props to Warner Brothers Games Montreal, not only for making a really well-designed game here, but also for doing something so original, for not just copying and pasting Arkham. This is so unapologetically not Arkham, and I gotta give them respect for such a ballsy concept in a game, and for executing it as well as they did. I'm not going to pretend like I don't have issues with it, but I've been having a lot of fun with Gotham Knights, and I can't wait to play more of it. Those are my thoughts for now. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions for me about my experience with Gotham Knights, leave them in the comments below. I'm going to do an AMA video about Gotham Knights tomorrow. But again, please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Thank you all so much for watching the channel, and we will see you guys in the next one.